Okay, so we're starting Romeo and Juliet this week. As part of that, you're going to have some notes to take on the background of Shakespeare and a little bit of background on drama terms in general. The drama terms are going to be, especially the plot pyramid, is going to be different from what we've done with short stories so far. So here we go. And again, these should go in your notebook, and you will have a couple pop quizzes here and there, but it's really good to know this information too for reading Romeo and Juliet. I'm not going to read through everything on here. I'll just add a little bit here and there. Um, I just include this information because who we think Shakespeare is might not be who he is. We don't have a ton of information on him. And after his death, hundreds of years after his death, we do get a lot of information about different people that might be William Shakespeare. There was a person named that, but did he really write his work? It's a kind of a strange mystery. But so anyway, this is the supposed information that we go by. He was born on the 23rd of April, 1564, Stratford upon Avon. They used to call places by where they were located. So upon Avon means next to the River Avon, and Warwickshire's in the UK. He died on April 23rd, 1616, so probably a sad birthday party. He died on his birthday. His father was a leather merchant, and his mother's name was Mary there. He married Anne Hathaway, not the Anne Hathaway from movies and TV, because she's alive now. But again, age difference there, kind of random. They had three children, and their oldest child unfortunately passed away. Childbirth. The first theater, when theaters were created, was called the Theater. They weren't like super creative back then. And Shakespeare was one of the main influences in adapting other plays. He was a freelance writer. He was never permanently connected to one theater. That's why he's called a freelance writer. Lord Chamberlain's Men. A lot of people have reproduced this name, so you might go and look online. There's Lord Chamberlain's Men, which is like a current play. They were the most famous version of Shakespeare's plays or Shakespeare's actors that were out there. It's called acting troupe or whatever. Kind of like if you watch The Impractical Jokers, they called themselves the Tenderloins. When they were actors. Lord Chamberlain's Men was what they called themselves. Shakespeare was a shareholder in his in writing the plays and producing the plays, so money was a main concern. Later, his acting troupe was called the King's Men, and he did help build the Globe Theater, the big wooden O, in 1598. So there's a Globe Theater that stands there now, but that is a replacement theater for the one that burned down or was burned down. A lot of people have copied Shakespeare's idea over the time since then. And he did, when I say pulled the Bill Gates, I mean he had a monopoly. He bought out any other actors that were around him. One group there is called the Blackfriars, which were child actors, male child actors, because there weren't female child actors, and we'll talk about that. Here's a bunch of stuff that was in the Globe Theater. They didn't have scenery, so nowadays you probably find it rather boring. Moved really fast because sometimes they were 4 or 5 hours long. It was like going to a baseball stadium, except without playing baseball. You could only have plays during the day because they didn't have lights back then. No one sat more than 60 feet away because they didn't have good acoustics. They didn't have big speakers. The sound effects were all done by musicians. So if you heard like lightning or whatever, that would be done from cymbals crackling together or something. And costumes were used because people sometimes couldn't hear what was going on, so you had to wear costumes that were really outstandingly bold because you had to show what people were like, who was who, basically. So if they were wearing purple, you would know somebody's supposed to be royalty or a king. The old Globe Theater, again, just copy this information down. I'm not going to really walk through all of it, but when you see the term Puritan, Puritans, as far as religion go, didn't agree with Shakespeare's plays and thought they were kind of, I guess, for the time, X-rated, pornographic, I guess, for lack of a better term, and they burnt down the theater, allegedly. So, when we read his plays, we'll read the first scene together, and you'll see that a lot of his stuff is, especially for this long ago, very edgy. Most of the plays were outside of the city because people didn't like them. They thought they were, kind of like the Shameless, if you ever saw that show of their day. Other reasons people disliked the plays were, well, one was because they thought it was morally wrong, it was offensive. And two is because of the plague. If you went there, you could die. You could get the plague and you could die. Here's how the plays were advertised and some other random background. Playbills they would send out, like if you ever saw those little handouts that you get if you go to a play or a movie or whatever. That's how they would advertise. They only took place during the daytime. A flag was flown to show that the play was going on. Some buildings still do that. I know the pool in my condo complex does that. Like if the flag's up, we're open. So that's how you would know. The admission was a penny to get in. The pit was where people stood. If you ever heard of like the pit when you go to like a concert nowadays, that's where the groundlings stood. Groundlings are people that didn't pay a lot and had to stand around the whole time, basically like general admittance to a concert. Nowadays, people would pay a real lot to be able to be in the front. Back then, it was a status thing to be way in the back. So being in the pit was bad. I know I've paid a lot to go to sit in the pit section of concerts nowadays, but back then it was seen as the quote unquote economically challenged individuals that would sit there if you were poor. So, the higher up you sat, the more status you had. Like the skyboxes, basically, if you go to a football game. This is again more information about the background of the play. Then you have breaks. There's a thing called a tiring house where people would go and change. It's a dressing room. Costumes were super expensive. All actors were male, and kids played girls. Girls were not allowed to be actors. And again, there were no scenery. You can copy all this down. The scenes ending in a play would be signaled by a couplet or a couple couplets, meaning two lines rhyming in a row. It'd be awkward for someone to say a whole play this way. They would end a scene that way. So if someone's like, "Oh my God, I've been standing here for an hour. When is this going to end? I need to go," and you'd hear that and go, "Oh, now I can go to the bathroom or whatever you need to do and take a break." So that was when you started hearing rhyming, you knew it was time to go. And again, more things about it. His plays, they weren't all published in his lifetime. A lot of them weren't considered to be good literature. Most of them were written very quickly. He did take from other people. So, like Julius Caesar, one of his plays was actually, if you look it up, there's a guy named Plutarch who he took a lot of that play from. Other people were thieves as well, though. A lot of his plays that he wrote, actors would take the actual script, steal it, and then sell it on the black market. So there were things called good quartos and bad quartos, meaning scripts. The good scripts were ones that were provided by the theater, and they would actually watch these scripts and collect them back from the people who were performing. Bad quartos were the ones that made it out. People stole them, or they scripted them out on shorthand, like wrote them down real fast, and then stole, the wording of it and sold it. So nowadays we might have versions of his plays that aren't actually accurate because they were stolen. Monologue and soliloquy are big terms that we're going to have on a bunch of our tests, and you really need to know the difference. A monologue, long speech, a little bit shorter than a soliloquy, but a long speech to the audience in the actual play, reveals the thoughts of the character, so they're speaking their mind, but to the characters in the play. A soliloquy, the word solo means by yourself, a long speech, alone on stage, but to us, you're alone. There's nobody around. It's a long speech to us to let us know what they're thinking. You can't have a thought bubble pop up over their head. So it's to let us know what they're thinking. And then finally, we have an aside here. I'm not going to go back through all of this, but I'm just going to go through this one term here. That's really all you have to get here. An aside is where a character pulls another character aside to the side and delivers a soliloquy just to that one person. So if I needed to say something to somebody and I didn't want everybody to hear it, like, "Hey, I want to go kill that person," everybody can't walk off stage over and over again. So you pull that one person to the side and then give them a little speech, and then they would go back and continue with the play. Again, grab all these terms, what an act is, what a scene is. Dialogue is talking between characters. A tragedy is a play that ends usually with the death of the tragic hero. Again, tragedy ends with the death of the tragic hero. And a tragic flaw is the problem or flaw that a character has, the protagonist has, that ends up causing their death. So with Romeo, it's that he loves too much. And again, tragedy, a play that ends with the death of the tragic hero. And a tragic flaw is what causes that character to die. I'm going to stop here and pick up with the next screencast, the second screencast for finishing your notes.